Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Books and Bytes. Today we're diving into a
Oh.
fascinating creative history with the German Hansa by Philippe Dollinger.
Mm-hmm.
This book chronicles the rise and fall of the Hanseatic League,
Right.
a powerful medieval trade network that dominated Northern Europe for centuries.
For centuries, yep.
Um,
Yeah.
It's a story of shrewd merchants, political maneuvering,
Absolutely.
and economic forces that shape the course of history.
It's one of the things that I find so interesting about this book is that it brings together so many different elements. It's not just a dry account of, names and dates and all of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But he really brings in the sort of social context.
Yeah.
And some of the, the personal stories even
Right.
of some of these merchants and the challenges and triumphs that they faced in building this trading empire.
Yeah. You said empire of trade, and that's a great way to put it. I'm curious.
Yeah.
What are some of the key themes that emerge from this book? What should we be paying attention to as we delve into this deep dive?
Okay, well, one of the things that Dollinger highlights is the power of collective action.
Mm-hmm.
These merchants, they realized early on that by banding together,
Yeah.
they could overcome obstacles and achieve far more
Yeah.
than they could individually.
Right?
It's a fascinating study in how cooperation can lead to incredible success.
Yeah. I mean, imagine sailing across the Baltic Sea in those days.
Oh, yeah.
Pirates, storms,
Exactly.
unpredictable rulers. I mean, it sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It did, and they were really at the mercy of the elements,
Yeah.
and political whims and so forth.
Oh,
So banding together
Yeah.
for protection and mutual benefit was absolutely crucial.
Yeah. So that collective spirit is what allowed them to build this network
Exactly.
that stretched from London all the way over to Novgorod,
Mm-hmm.
dominating trade and everything: furs, timber, fish,
Yeah.
grain, cloth.
That's right. They established these trading posts known as contour
Right.
in major cities, and these really became centers of both
Yeah.
economic and political power.
Yeah, these contour, I mean, they weren't just warehouses.
No, that were more like many empires within these cities.
Right.
With their own rules, customs, governance.
Mm-hmm.
Dollinger gives a vivid picture of what life was like in these enclaves.
Right.
For example, he talks about the Steel Yard in London, which was this
Yeah.
hub of Hanseatic power for centuries,
Mm-hmm.
enjoying special privileges granted by the English monarchs.
It sounds like they were masters at playing the political game,
Oh, absolutely.
using their economic leverage to secure favorable terms and advance their own interests.
They were shrewd negotiators, very skilled at diplomacy.
Mm-hmm.
And as Dollinger points out, they weren't afraid to use,
Right.
their economic might to pressure rulers,
Mm-hmm.
to enforce trade embargoes, even to engage in conflicts, to protect their dominance.
Right.
So they were tough
Yeah.
when they needed to be.
It sounds like we've got a story here of collective action, economic dominance,
Mm-hmm.
political maneuvering, and even a bit of intrigue and conflict.
Absolutely.
So where does Dollinger begin this tale? What were those early days of the Hanseatic League like?
Well, he takes us back to the 12th century,
Okay.
a time when German merchants faced immense dangers while trading abroad.
Yeah.
The Baltic Sea was a pretty lawless place,
I bet.
rife with pirates,
Right.
unpredictable weather.
Right.
Individual merchants were vulnerable to attack, robbery, extortion.
It's hard to imagine the courage it must have taken to set sail
Oh, yeah.
in those conditions, knowing the risks were so high.
Yeah.
What prompted them to band together in the first place?
Well, it seems to have been a combination of factors.
Okay.
There was a growing sense of shared identity among these German merchants,
Right.
many of whom hailed from similar regions and faced common challenges. And as trade expanded,
Yeah.
the risks and the need for protection became more apparent. And it was
Yeah.
a classic case of necessity being the mother of invention.
So they started forming these loose associations,
Right.
pooling resources, looking out for each other.
Exactly.
Did they have a formal name at that point?
Not really. It
Yeah.
was very informal in the beginning.
Right.
Dollinger points out that the term Hanse itself simply meant association or guild
Right.
in the language of the time.
Yeah.
So it was really a very gradual process with
Wow.
these early collaborations evolving into more structured arrangements over time.
Okay, so how did these loose associations eventually transform into the powerful Hanseatic League that we know from history? What were the key turning points?
Well, one of the pivotal moments,
Yeah.
according to Dollinger, was the signing of a treaty
Okay.
between Lübeck and Hamburg in 1241.
Correct.
This agreement, aimed at protecting their shared trade interests,
Mm-hmm.
is often seen as the foundation of the Hanseatic League.
Interesting.
It set a precedent for cooperation
Yeah.
and laid the groundwork for a more formal structure.
It's interesting how a seemingly simple agreement between two cities could spark such a significant development.
Yeah.
So this treaty between Lübeck and Hamburg, was it purely defensive, or did it have broader ambitions?
Well, it was initially focused on mutual protection against piracy and robbery,
Mm-hmm.
but it quickly became apparent
Yeah.
that this alliance had the potential to achieve much more.
Okay.
They realized they could use their combined strength to negotiate better terms
Okay.
with foreign rulers
Mhm.
and to secure access to new markets.
It's like they stumbled on a winning formula.
Yeah.
Cooperate for protection,
Mm.
then leverage that unity for economic gain.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So how did other cities react to this burgeoning alliance?
Well, as you might imagine,
Yeah.
not everyone welcomed the Hanseatic League's growing power.
Sure.
Some saw them as a threat. Others were hesitant to give up their autonomy.
Right.
But the League's success was hard to ignore.
Yeah.
Their ability to secure safe passage,
Mm-hmm.
negotiate favorable trade agreements,
Right.
access lucrative markets made them a pretty attractive proposition.
Yeah, it sounds like a classic case of if you can't beat them, join them.
Yeah, pretty much.
Did the League actively recruit new members, or was it more of an organic process?
It was a bit of both.
Okay.
They strategically sought alliances with key cities that could strengthen their network.
Right.
But they also recognized the importance of maintaining a sense of shared purpose and identity among their members.
Okay.
So they weren't just interested in adding numbers. They
Yeah.
wanted partners who were committed
Yeah.
to the League's goals and principles.
So it was about finding the right fit,
Exactly.
cities that shared their values and could contribute to that collective good.
Mm-hmm.
Did this focus on shared identity and purpose ever lead to internal conflicts?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Maintaining unity among such a diverse group of cities,
Right.
each with their own interests and ambitions,
Sure.
was a constant challenge.
Yeah.
Dollinger describes several instances where internal disputes threatened to tear the League apart.
I could imagine that, egos and economic rivalries must have played a role.
Yeah.
Were there any particularly notable conflicts that Dollinger highlights?
Well, one that stands out is the rivalry between Lübeck and Cologne,
Okay.
two of the most powerful Hanseatic cities.
Right.
They frequently clashed over trade routes,
Mm,
access to markets,
right.
political influence within the League.
So like a real-life
Yeah,
Game of Thrones, but with merchants
exactly.
vying for power instead of monarchs.
That's a good way to put it.
How did they manage to keep these internal conflicts from destroying the League altogether?
That's one of the key questions that Dollinger explores.
Yeah.
He argues that despite their differences, the Hanseatic cities recognized that their collective strength outweighed their individual ambitions.
Okay.
So they developed mechanisms for resolving disputes,
Yeah.
things like arbitration, compromise,
Right.
and they were willing to put aside their differences when faced with external threats.
So they had a remarkable ability to find common ground when it really mattered.
Yeah, they did.
Was there a formal governing structure, like a council or a leader, that helped maintain order and unity?
Well, that's what makes the Hanseatic League so unique.
Okay.
Unlike a traditional kingdom or empire, they didn't have a central authority
Right.
or a single ruler.
Wow.
Their power was decentralized,
Okay.
resting in the hands of the member cities themselves.
So how did they make decisions and enforce their policies without this central governing body?
Well, they developed a system of assemblies
Right.
known as Hanse tags,
Okay.
where representatives from these member cities would meet
Mm.
to discuss common concerns, make decisions,
Yeah.
resolve disputes. These Hanse tags were essential to the League's functioning,
Yeah.
providing a platform for negotiation, compromise, and collective action.
So these Hanse tags, were they formal gatherings with elaborate ceremonies
Yeah.
or more like informal meetings of equals?
Well, Dollinger describes them as a blend of both.
Okay.
They were serious business meetings,
Mm-hmm.
often held in grand halls,
Right.
attended by powerful merchants and city officials.
Right.
But they were also opportunities for networking,
Yeah.
socializing,
Yeah.
building relationships
Yeah.
that transcended individual city rivalries.
Okay, I can almost picture it.
Yeah.
Merchants from across Northern Europe gathered in this grand hall, hammering out deals, sharing news,
Yeah.
perhaps enjoying a mug of ale or two.
It is, Guy.
Did these Hanse tags always result in harmonious agreements?
Well, let's just say
Yeah.
that achieving consensus among dozens of independent cities,
Right.
each with their own agenda,
Yeah.
was no easy feat.
I can imagine.
Dollinger describes several instances where these Hanse tags were marked by, heated debates,
Yeah.
tense negotiations,
Yeah.
even threats of secession.
So they were walking a tightrope, trying to balance individual interests with that collective good.
Yeah.
Were there any specific examples of these Hanse tag dramas that stand out?
Well, one particularly dramatic episode
Yeah.
involved a dispute over trade with Flanders in the 14th century.
Okay.
Several cities, led by Cologne,
Mm.
wanted to impose a trade embargo on Flanders to pressure them
Right.
into granting more favorable terms.
Yeah.
But Lübeck, fearing the economic consequences of such a drastic move,
Right.
vehemently opposed the embargo.
So a clash of economic philosophies and strategic visions.
Exactly.
What happened? Did they manage to find some kind of compromise?
After weeks of heated debate and intense negotiations,
Yeah.
they finally reached a compromise.
Okay.
Instead of a full-blown embargo,
Right.
they agreed on a series of targeted sanctions and diplomatic maneuvers
Okay.
aimed at pressuring Flanders without crippling their own trade.
That sounds like a masterful display of diplomacy and compromise.
It was.
It's remarkable how they managed to navigate these complex issues without resorting to violence or just breaking apart.
Yeah.
It speaks to the strength of their shared purpose and their ability to find that common ground despite their differences.
It does.
But as we know, all good things must come to an end.
Right.
What factors ultimately led to the decline of this seemingly invincible alliance?
Well, that's a question we'll delve into further in the next part of our deep dive. But let's just say that the winds of change were blowing.
Right.
And even the mighty Hanseatic League
Yeah.
couldn't escape those forces that were reshaping the world around them. Welcome back to our deep dive into the Hanseatic League.
Last time we left off with the League at the height of its power.
Right.
Navigating those internal disputes while dominating trade across Northern Europe. It's hard to imagine how anything could shake such a powerful alliance.
Yeah.
But history tells us they didn't last forever.
That's right. Dollinger dedicates a significant portion of the book to the factors that ultimately led to the League's decline.
Okay.
And it's a fascinating study in how even the most successful organizations
Right.
can be vulnerable to shifts in the political, economic, and social landscape.
Okay, so let's unpack those shifts.
Okay.
What were the major forces that started to chip away at the League's dominance?
One of the most significant factors was the rise of powerful nation-states. As countries like England, France, and the Netherlands consolidated their power, they began to assert their own economic interests, often at the expense of the Hanseatic League.
So it's like the local rulers were realizing, hey, we can handle this trade thing ourselves.
Yes, exactly.
We don't need this outside group controlling everything.
Right, and these emerging nations started to develop their own merchant fleets, enact protectionist policies, and limit the privileges that the Hanseatic League had enjoyed for centuries.
Yeah.
It's a classic example of how the balance of power can shift over time.
Did the League try to adapt to these changing political realities?
They did?
Or did they cling to their old ways?
Dollinger argues that they made attempts to adapt.
Okay.
But their deeply ingrained structures and ways of doing business made it difficult for them to respond effectively to these new challenges. They were used to operating with a high degree of autonomy, and they weren't always willing to compromise with these newly empowered nation states.
So they were caught between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah.
They were losing their privileged position. But they weren't quite equipped to operate in a world dominated by these powerful nation states.
Exactly.
Were there any specific examples of this clash?
Yes.
Between the old Hanseatic order and the new national interests?
Well, one particularly telling example is a case of England in the 16th century.
Okay.
Under Henry VII and Elizabeth I, England adopted a much more aggressive stance towards the Hanseatic League. revoking many of their privileges
Right.
and promoting English merchants at their expense.
So England was basically saying, time to share the wealth, folks.
Yeah, pretty much.
Did this signal the beginning of the end for the League's influence in England?
It pretty much did.
Wow.
The League tried to negotiate and resist these changes, but they were ultimately outmaneuvered by the English crown.
Okay.
Their dominance in English trade, which had been a cornerstone of their power for centuries, was effectively broken.
It's a stark reminder that even the mightiest empires can crumble when the ground beneath them shifts.
It is.
Were there other factors besides the rise of the nation-states that contributed to the League's decline?
Alongside these political changes, there were significant economic shifts happening as well. The discovery of the New World in the late 15th century led to a dramatic expansion of global trade routes, with new markets and opportunities opening up across the Atlantic.
It's like the world suddenly got a whole lot bigger.
Yes.
And the Hanseatic League's focus on the Baltic Sea started to feel, well, a bit limited.
Exactly. And while they did try to establish a presence in the Atlantic trade, they were late to the game. Other European powers, like Portugal and Spain, had already established themselves in the Americas and the East Indies. The Hanseatic League, with its traditional focus on the Baltic, struggled to adapt to this new global landscape.
So they were facing competition on all sides.
Yes.
From rising nation-states in their traditional territories and from these new global players in these emerging markets.
That's right.
Did this external pressure exacerbate the internal tensions within the League itself?
Without a doubt. As their economic and political power waned, the bonds that had held the League together began to fray. Individual cities became more focused on their own interests, leading to disputes over trade routes, access to markets, and the allocation of resources.
It's a familiar pattern, isn't it? When times get tough, unity often gives way to self-preservation.
Unfortunately, yes.
And that's exactly what happened with the Hanseatic League.
It is.
Dollinger details how these internal conflicts intensified as the League's overall power diminished. They squabbled over trade policies, territorial claims, and even religious differences.
Yeah, it was a challenging time.
So they were facing a perfect storm of challenges. External pressure from these new rivals and shifting trade routes, and internal divisions driven by self-interest and declining fortunes.
That's a really apt way to put it.
Was there any one defining moment that marked the end of the Hanseatic League?
Not really.
Or was it more of a gradual fading away?
There wasn't a single catastrophic event that brought about their demise. It was more of a slow and drawn-out process, a gradual erosion of their power and influence by the mid-17th century. The Hanseatic League had essentially ceased to exist as a major political and economic force.
It's a bittersweet ending to such a remarkable story.
It is.
They dominated trade for centuries, shaping the course of European history. But ultimately, they couldn't withstand those forces that were reshaping the world around them. What happened to those famous contours, those mini empires within cities?
Well, some contour, like the steel yard in London, were eventually closed down or absorbed into the national structures of their host countries. But in some cities, like Bergen in Norway, you can still find remnants of these Hanseatic trading posts.
Wow.
Their distinctive architecture and legacy live on, serving as a tangible reminder of their past glory.
It's like finding a hidden treasure. A glimpse into a forgotten world.
It is.
So the Hanseatic League might be gone, but their legacy endures.
It does.
What are some of their most lasting contributions, according to Dollinger?
He argues that their influence extends far beyond the realm of economics. They played a crucial role in shaping the development of maritime law, commercial practices, and urban planning. Their emphasis on standardization, efficiency, and the rule of law had a lasting impact on European society.
So they weren't just about making money. They were pioneers in establishing these systems and practices that facilitated trade and promoted stability.
Exactly.
It's like they were the architects of a more interconnected and prosperous Europe.
That's a good way to put it.
And their influence went beyond Europe as well.
It did.
Their innovative approaches to trade and organization inspired other merchant networks and contributed to the development of global trade as we know it today.
That's right.
They left an indelible mark on the world. even though their time in the spotlight eventually came to an end.
They did.
It's a reminder that even the most powerful organizations and empires are not immune to the forces of change.
That's true.
But their legacy can live on, shaping the world in ways that we might not even realize.
Exactly. And that's one of the key takeaways from Dollinger's book.
Yeah.
The Hanseatic League story is not just a fascinating historical account.
Yeah.
It's a timeless study of power, innovation, adaptability, and the enduring impact of human ambition and collaboration.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the Hanseatic League.
Yeah.
We've explored their rise to power, their dominance of trade, and the factors that led to their eventual decline.
Yeah.
It's been a fascinating journey through a pivotal period in European history.
Absolutely.
And as we wrap up our exploration of Dollinger's The German Hansa, I think it's worth reflecting on what lessons we can draw from this remarkable story.
Sure.
The Hanseatic League's rise and fall offers valuable insights into the dynamics of power.
Absolutely.
The importance of adaptation, and the enduring impact of human ingenuity.
It really does.
You mentioned lessons.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, what stood out to you as the most significant takeaways from Dollinger's analysis?
Well, one of the key lessons, I think, is the power of collective action.
Okay.
The Hanseatic League demonstrated that even in a fragmented and often chaotic world, cooperation and collaboration can achieve remarkable results.
Yeah.
By pooling their resources, coordinating their efforts, and leveraging their collective strength, they were able to overcome obstacles, secure privileges, and build a network of influence that spanned vast distances.
It's a testament to the idea that there's strength in numbers.
Yeah.
Especially when facing common challenges. I mean, they essentially created their own nation of trade, complete with assemblies, treaties, even a system of law enforcement. It's a remarkable achievement, considering the political landscape of medieval Europe.
It is. It's remarkable how they managed to create this sort of self-governing entity.
Precisely. And their success wasn't just about brute force or economic dominance. They understood the importance of diplomacy, negotiation, and compromise.
Absolutely. They were masters at navigating that complex web of relationships between cities, rulers, and competing interests. Their ability to find common ground and forge alliances was crucial to their longevity.
So it was a delicate balancing act, wasn't it?
It was.
They had to maintain unity within their own ranks while also adapting to the shifting political and economic winds around them. It sounds like a recipe for stress.
It was a constant challenge.
And as we discussed earlier, their eventual decline was partly due to their inability to maintain that balance. As their external challenges mounted, their internal divisions intensified, making it difficult for them to respond effectively to new threats and opportunities.
Exactly. And that's something that we see again and again throughout history.
It's a reminder that even the most successful organizations can become victims of their own success. If they fail to adapt, to evolve, and to maintain a shared sense of purpose, they risk becoming too rigid, too set in their ways to survive in a changing world.
That's a profound insight.
And it's particularly relevant in today's world, where we're facing rapid technological advancements, shifting geopolitical landscapes, and unprecedented economic interconnectedness. The lessons we can learn from the Hanseatic League's experience are more timely than ever.
They are.
Absolutely. I'm also struck by the fact that the Hanseatic League's legacy extends far beyond their economic achievements. They left an indelible mark on European society.
Absolutely.
Influencing everything from maritime law and commercial practices to urban planning and architecture.
They really did.
Dollinger makes a compelling case.
He does.
For their broader impact. They weren't just traders.
No.
They were innovators, diplomats, and even cultural ambassadors. Their emphasis on standardization, efficiency, and the rule of law laid the groundwork for many of the principles that underpin modern commerce and international relations.
They did. They left a lasting legacy.
It's fascinating to consider how a medieval trade network could have such far-reaching consequences. Their story is a reminder that history is not just a collection of dates and battles.
Right.
It's a tapestry woven with threads of human ambition, ingenuity, and collaboration.
I like that. That's a good way to put it.
And those threads continue to influence the world we live in today.
They do.
Well said. And as we conclude our deep dive into the Hanseatic League, I'd like to leave our listeners with a thought-provoking question. As we navigate the complexities of a globalized world, facing challenges that echo those faced by the Hanseatic League centuries ago, what lessons from their experience can we apply to our own time?
Yeah, that's a good question.
How can we harness the power of collective action, innovation, and adaptation to build a more sustainable and prosperous future?
A question worth pondering, for sure.
That's a question worth pondering indeed. The Hanseatic League's story offers a wealth of insights for anyone interested in understanding the dynamics of power, the challenges of globalization, and the enduring legacy of human ambition and collaboration.
Absolutely.
I highly recommend Dollinger's The German Hansa for anyone who wants to delve deeper into this fascinating chapter of history.
I second that recommendation.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to Books and Bytes. We hope you enjoyed this journey through history. Until next time, keep exploring, flooring, keep learning, flooring, and keep those pages turning.